The creator economy has totally reshaped so many industries, right? But maybe none have been more controversial than sex work. So today, we're going to dive deep into the really complex world of digital sex work, the stigma that just won't go away, and, believe it or not, the surprising ways that stigma is actually managed from the inside.
Okay, let's kick things off with this quote from an OnlyFans creator named Julia. She calls her work feminist. Now, that statement, it just cuts right through all the usual stories we hear, and it gets to the very heart of what we're exploring today. How can a job that's so heavily stigmatized also be seen as a source of empowerment?
To even begin to understand that, we first have to get a handle on the powerful social force that shapes this entire industry: stigma.
So what is stigma, really? Well, let's look at the classic definition from sociologist Erving Goffman. He called it attributes that are deeply discrediting. This isn't just about people disapproving of you. It's a social mark that fundamentally spoils your identity. It makes just getting through everyday life incredibly difficult.
And this ties right into another key concept: dirty work. Sex work often gets lumped into this category, jobs that are seen as tainted, whether that's physically, socially, or morally. And again, this isn't just about the work itself. It becomes a moral judgment, a symbol of degradation for the people who do it. It's why this is one of the most severely stigmatized professions out there.
All of this intense stigma, it leads to a really polarized debate. It basically splits the conversation into two camps. Are digital sex workers victims being exploited, or are they savvy entrepreneurs who are paving their own way?
Now listen to Sarah, another creator. She completely flips that script. For her, OnlyFans isn't the exploitation, it's the escape from the exploitation she felt in a normal 9-to-5. She calls it liberating, and this perspective you'll find is really central to how many creators see themselves.
So here you can see those two conflicting stories side by side. On the left, you've got the entrepreneur narrative. This is the story creators tell about themselves. It's all about autonomy, success, and empowerment. But on the right, you have the victim narrative, which is what you see all over the media, especially in documentaries that tend to frame sex workers as abused or coerced.
But here's where things get way more complicated. You think stigma is just an external thing, right? Pressure from the outside? Well, in a fascinating twist, it also operates inside the sex work community, creating this really complex internal hierarchy. And researchers actually have a name for this: the whorearchy. It's basically a system where sex workers rank each other to figure out their own place in the social order. By positioning themselves as better than others, they're trying to push some of the stigma they face onto people they see as being lower down the ladder.
Now, I know this flowchart looks a little complicated, but it basically maps out the main ways creators try to manage all this stigma. You've got things like reframing their work or hiding their identity. But what I really want you to notice is strategy number 4, way over on the right: social waiting. This is the core of the hierarchy. It's the act of distancing yourself from other sex workers to boost your own status.
So, how does this ranking actually work? Well, it plays out along 3 key lines. First, there's physical stigma. Less nudity and less direct contact is seen as better. Second, socioeconomic stigma. Having a higher income or coming from a higher class gives you more status. And third, there's moral stigma. Doing the work for empowerment is seen as better than doing it just because you need the money. And here's a perfect and pretty stark example of that social weighting in action. This creator, Marie, straight up says her work is a good thing because it keeps men from going to the nearest prostitute. So in her effort to make her own work seem legitimate, she's actually reinforcing the stigma against another group of sex workers.
This whole internal struggle for status, it's all tied to a much bigger question. Who gets to tell the story of sex work in the first place? Because the platform, the medium you use, it changes everything.
So on a platform like OnlyFans, the logic is pretty simple. The creator is in control. They are building their own brand, they're setting their own prices, and they're making their own content. They are the author of their own story. But then you look at traditional media, like a documentary, and that logic gets flipped on its head. The filmmaker is the one who controls the frame. They choose what to ask, they edit the answers, and they shape the final story, often taking that control away from the subject. Let's just break that down a little. On OnlyFans, it's direct. You see how the creator wants to present themselves. But in documentaries, the process is filtered. Things like those close-up, confessional-style interviews can really emphasize a feeling of shame.
And because they rarely show the clients, the whole thing becomes this lopsided monologue that can end up reinforcing the very victim story that creators are trying so hard to get away from.
Now, this struggle for control and this internal competition, it might seem like it's unique to sex work, but it's really not. These exact dynamics, the intense focus on personal branding, the competition, the fragmented communities, these are the hallmarks of the entire gig economy.
You see, the whole economic system these platforms are built on, some call it neoliberal platform capitalism, is basically designed to make every worker an entrepreneur who's responsible for their own success. And that intense focus on building your personal brand can make it incredibly hard to build the kind of solidarity you need for collective action or to fight stigma as a unified group.
So after all that, what are the big things to remember here? First, technology doesn't make stigma disappear. A lot of the time, it just pushes it onto people who are already the most vulnerable. Second, the gig economy itself, with its focus on individuals, can break apart the very communities that might have the power to challenge that stigma. And finally, the hierarchy, it's not just about being judgmental. It's a rational, even if it's harsh, strategy for individual survival.
And for all the talk about new platforms and creator control, that external stigma is still incredibly powerful. Just look at this number, 47%. That's the percentage of people in Germany, a country where sex work is completely legal, who see it as a legitimate profession. Less than half. The cultural battle is clearly far from over.
Which leaves us with one final and I think really provocative question. And this goes way beyond sex work. This applies to every freelancer, every creator, every gig worker out there. In an economic system that pushes every one of us to become our own individual brand, can we ever truly come together and build collective power?